21 Chapter 21 You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. There existed a small village in the middle of nowhere. The population of the small village was only 50. The village was cut off from most of the world. People grew their own vegetables here and used the fruits from the nearby forest. They also had a source of water available. Despite having all the things they needed to live comfortably, the village was slowly dying as people kept migrating to bigger cities. Throughout the years, the population of the village kept dwindling. Despite all the troubles, there were still some people who just refused to leave their village, no matter what. These were the old people who kept the village running. Unfortunately, all those old people were sitting on the ground, not daring to move. They didn't even know how it happened, but they were the prisoners of their own shadows that had come to life. The shadows were keeping these people hostages, pointing a shadow sword at them. Half the shadows had gone to surround the village to make sure no one could get in or leave. The others kept an eye on the villagers. This was the village where Lyra had brought Gabriel. Not only was this place the closest to the forest they were previously in, but it also had what they needed. One of the old men in the village had a horse farm that had some really nice horses. Lyra could fly, but she was informed by Gabriel that he couldn't, so she brought him here to get him a horse. She couldn't just carry him inside the royal city by air. Both of them were going to be caught, so they needed a horse. Select any horse you like. I don't think the people outside would mind. There were 7 horses inside the farm, and all of them looked great. Gabriel observed the horses briefly before staring back at Lyra. I don't know how to ride a horse either. Even if I select, won't it be useless? You can just drop me near the royal capital. I'll walk from there. Lyra refused the suggestion without even thinking about it. If the guards at the royal capital saw a light mage who was neither flying nor had a horse, they could get suspicious, which I don't want. It'll make things more difficult for you. And as far as horse riding is concerned, that's not hard. We have all the time in the world. I can teach you. You just select a horse that you want. If you say so. Gabriel selected a black horse that was closest to him. The horse had a long mane of hair along its upper back. It also looked to be the youngest here but not too young. It's the one then. Not a bad choice. Lyra patted the head of the young horse before bringing him out. For some reason, the horse was really tame. It was as if it was just following whatever she wanted, even without her having to command. Gabriel observed the strange phenomenon and couldn't stop himself from asking. Can you control horses? Lyra shook her head. It's just the horse can sense my aura since I'm connected to his shadow right now. I can't control the horse, but I can somewhat manipulate him through that connection. It doesn't work on humans though. I'll tell you more about it on the way. Lyra left the barn. The villagers were still sitting on the ground, worried for their lives. Lyra walked to those people. I'm taking this horse. I hope none of you mind. No one raised any objection in response. That's better. After today, you won't see me again. But there's one thing you should know. If any of you try to tell anyone about what happened here, I might have to return, and that won't be good for you. The leader of the village raised his head. You have my word. We won't tell anyone. You can take the horse as long as you let us live. It's so good to talk to people who aren't stubborn. Lyra flashed a beautiful smile in response. See? No one had to die. She placed 3 gold coins on the ground. This should cover the cost of the horse and more. Leaving the money for the horse, Lyra climbed on the horse before reaching out her hand toward Gabriel. Come up. Time to leave. I can climb on my own. Gabriel decided against taking her help for this small task. He climbed on the horse on his own and sat, leaving a little space between him and the young lady. Lyra noticed the gap between the two. It appeared as if Gabriel was still hesitating in trusting her completely. Are you looking to fall? She asked. I'm a fast rider. You'll fall if you don't hold on to me. Come closer and hold me firmly if you don't want to fall. Gabriel let out a tired sigh before sliding closer to Lyra. Their bodies stuck so closely to each other that not even an inch of gap was left between the two. Since Gabriel had already sent his staff back to formation storage according to Lyra's teaching previously, both his hands were free. He wrapped his arms around the slim waist of Lyra, holding her firmly. The horse started moving, and it was exactly as Lyra had stated, the horse was really fast. If Gabriel wasn't holding on to her firmly, he could have fallen right at the start. The villagers watched the two youngsters leave the town. The shadows that were keeping them hostage had also disappeared, turning into nothingness. The leader of the village, who had promised Lyra that he wasn't going to tell anyone about their appearance, commanded a middle-aged man who stood behind him. Ron, take another horse and go to the Church of Light branch in the closest town and tell them what happened here. What? Didn't you just promise them that you won't do it? The middle-aged man asked in response. Those two were dark mages. We don't need to keep our promises to them. Do as I say. Tell the holy mages that two dark mages had appeared and also tell them the direction they went in. Those two need to be caught. But her promise. What if she comes back? She won't. She will be dead by then. And even if she survives, she won't know we informed the mages of light. Just do as I said. Inform them so they can catch those two demons fast. The leader commanded. Fine. I'll do as you ask. Ron ultimately agreed. He couldn't oppose the chief of the village. However, just as he was about to go to the barn, his face turned pale. He raised his trembling hands toward the old chief. No matter how much he tried to speak, no words came out of his lips. The old chief noticed that all the other villagers were looking at him with the same gazes. His face went still as he thought the worst. He slowly turned around, hoping he was wrong. As soon as he turned around, he saw a shadow warrior standing behind him. He couldn't even blink before the shadow sword came swinging. The man's head flew into the air before falling to the ground with his body. Throughout the day, painful screams echoed in the village as bodies kept piling on. Lyra had already traveled far away from the village when she slowed down. She gazed back toward the town. What happened? Why did you slow down? Gabriel looked back as well, wondering what she was looking at. Nothing. Just amazed by the stupidity of some people who thought they can survive by breaking a promise. It's nothing we need to care for. 22 Chapter 22 You are listening at novelfull.audio. An entire village was wiped from the face of this earth. All 50 people in the village were dead, and not a single person outside knew about it since the village was disconnected from the rest of the world for the most part. Lyra didn't tell Gabriel what she did, but even if she did, she didn't think Gabriel would have cared. She had given those people an option to save their lives by keeping their mouths shut, but they refused to listen. She didn't believe she was in the wrong. She just did what she had promised to do. They were in the wrong for making her do it. This isn't the direction to the royal capital, is it? The two of them had only left the village a short time ago when Gabriel realized something. The sun was behind them. That meant they were going in the wrong direction. That's right. We aren't going to the royal capital right away. Lyra confessed. Where are we going then? You aren't ready to get to the royal capital yet. There are still a few things we need to handle to ensure you have the highest chance of success. That's why I'm taking you somewhere special, Lyra explained. As you said before, there are a few people in the capital who recognize you and know what you are, so we need all the precautions we can take. You have a way to make sure they don't recognize me. I don't think a disguise will work on me. Gabriel shook his head in response. He assumed that she was taking him to a makeup artist who was going to place a fake mustache and beard on his face for his disguise. He believed it wasn't going to work. Don't worry, I'm not taking you to get a disguise. It's something more than that. You'll know when we get there. Lyra smiled in response. She believed Gabriel was going to be pleasantly surprised when he saw what she had planned. Lyra was the only dark mage that was still in existence, according to what she knew. All the other dark mages were killed in this world as soon as they awakened, so she could never protect anyone. She had always been alone. She had already lost hopes of someone else supporting her in this battle against the Holy Church. In her isolation, she didn't realize when she had gone inside a shell where her real optimistic personality had died. She didn't even remember the last time she was hopeful for what the future held for her. She just killed and killed to get a purpose in her fight. Now she wasn't alone. She had Gabriel, who had promised to support her. Even though the two had just met, she had already started considering him like her. The two were similar in more ways than one. She didn't want to lose Gabriel and go back to being all alone. The mission was not only for her sake, but it was for everyone like her who had to fight for their lives in this biased world. In this battle, she didn't want to lose Gabriel. She wanted him to come out safely, and she was willing to waste as much time as she needed for it. It didn't matter how much they waited before infiltrating the holy city, but what mattered was doing it right on the first attempt. Because if they failed once, it was all going to be over. Gabriel was going to be killed and possibly her as well, since she wasn't going to sit back and watch him face the enemies alone. The fight for their freedom was going to end right there, and she didn't want that. As I told you before, I'll give you everything you need, no matter what I have to do for it, Lyra stated calmly. Gabriel didn't respond. He just gazed into the distance. The royal city was also known as the Holy City. He had already dreamed of going there, but now, that dream was coming true, but not as he had hoped. This time, the journey wasn't for his future and goals. This time, the journey was for his revenge and something even more than that. Can I ask you something? After a long silence, Gabriel asked. Anything you want, Lyra answered immediately. How many spells do you have in your grimoire? Lyra was slightly surprised at this question, but she didn't hold back on answering. More than 20. As for you, I suppose you have 2 or 3. One of them being the undead shield. How do you know how many spells I have? Gabriel asked in surprise. It's not hard to guess. The grimoires aren't like any other books. They are the holy books with lives of their own. That's how they can select hosts. They also decide how many spells you can access based on your spiritual strength, so you don't hurt yourself while using a spell. As you can expect, a grimoire won't want its host to die using a spell they can't use, right? I know you've just awakened, so you're probably a novice mage. Your soul power would be really weak for now, and that's why the grimoire won't give you any advanced or mid-tier spells. So I can guess you have a couple of spells only, but you don't have to worry about that. The stronger you get, the more spells you'll unlock, each being stronger than the last. Hearing Lyra's explanation, Gabriel finally understood. So this was the secret. Apparently, this wasn't written in any books, probably because there were only a few grimoires, so there was no need to generalize this information. Lyra further continued her explanation. You awaken a never-before-seen element, but that's about it. On the core, you're still the same old self. Your soul is also the same. You have a grimoire and probably an ancestral staff as well, but you aren't strong enough to hold their complete strength. Hearing her explanation, Gabriel was able to understand a few things that he didn't before. He had the weapons, but he didn't know how to use them properly. He also needed to strengthen his soul and advance as a mage so he could use stronger spells. Initially, he was confused about why this book only had 2 spells, but he finally had some clarity. He wasn't the only one who started with only 2 spells. The holy books were said to have lives of their own. The Book of Necromancy selected him. It also took him to safety when he had no other option. It was probably the same for all other holy books. Since the Forbidden Book of Necromancy wanted him to be safe, it only showed him the spells that he could use based on his current strength. As a basic mage who hadn't trained his soul yet, if he tried to use an advanced spell from the Holy Book, he could actually damage his soul forever, so he wasn't allowed to see those spells yet. So this lack of spells is nothing more than a safety mechanism, Gabriel commented. That would be accurate. That means you are stronger than me and can kill me whenever you want. Gabriel asked, frowning. He had only 2 low-tier spells while this lady had over 20, possibly even advanced spells of darkness. Didn't that mean she was in a different league altogether? Lyra shook her head in response. That's not entirely correct. She further continued, the spell you used in the forest. It was probably a basic tier spell for you, but the strength behind that spell. I felt it. Your basic spell was comparable to my stronger spells, if not stronger. I honestly don't know how that's possible. Even though you used the ancestral staff for that spell, your spell still shouldn't be comparable to my advanced spells, but it was. It's probably something about your element. Honestly, even I'm confused about it. Your element. It's something really special, Gabriel. If your basic tier spells are so strong, I can only imagine how strong your advanced tier spells are going to be. 23 Chapter 23 You are listening at novelfull.audio. Lyra's words surprised Gabriel. Even he hadn't expected her to say this. His basic spell was really so strong. Was the element of necromancy really something that special? If that was the case, then this element really held too many secrets, starting from its origin to how it ended up with him. 2 days passed as the group of 2 continued traveling together. Along the way, Lyra also stopped occasionally and allowed Gabriel to take the lead. She taught him how to ride a horse, how to hold ropes, and everything in between. Initially, even Gabriel struggled a bit, but with time, he got the hang of it. From that point on, the 2 of them took turns sitting at the front so Gabriel could get more experience. As Gabriel rode, Lyra also taught him how to correct his posture to appear more dignified like he needed to pretend to be. Within 2 days, Lyra had made sure that Gabriel went from a novice in horse riding to something that was no less than a royalty. Currently, it was also Gabriel who was sitting in the lead. Lyra sat behind him with her hands wrapped around young Gabriel. We are near our destination. That's the city, Lyra reminded Gabriel, pointing in the distance. Gabriel observed a beautiful city in the distance which was situated in the middle of a desert. Are there going to be mages of light in the city? Hopefully not. This city is too far from the capital. Moreover, it's not one of those luxurious cities where the mages would come for fun. In fact, it's a city that most mages avoid. It's a crime-infested city that no one wants to enter. So I doubt we will find any mage of light, Lyra explained. She licked her lips in amusement. And even if we do, I'll make sure they are dead before they lay their eyes on us. Who are we meeting in the city? A man known as Lambard. He's known as the uncrowned king of this city and also an antique collector. He is the one we came here for. And how will he help us? Not only can he help us, but his help might be the most crucial for us, Lyra responded. Gabriel made the horse stop at the city's entrance, where 2 guards were standing with spears, blocking the path. State your purpose. The guards said in unison. We're here to meet Lambard, Gabriel answered. The guards flinched as they heard the answer. The 2 guards noticed the gloves on the hands of Gabriel, which seemed to be covering the back of his hands. Are you a mage? One of the guards asked. Take off your gloves. Gabriel took off his left glove and showed the mark of light. That's right. I'm a mage. The 2 guards looked at each other momentarily before one of them stated, Master Lambard isn't in the city. He left 2 days ago for the city of Susum. Let me handle them. Lyra jumped off the horse, not liking the fact that these guards were wasting their time. BVEC, tell Lambard that Lyra is here to meet him, and if he doesn't meet us, I'll bring this entire city down. You dare talk about Master like that? The guards exclaimed in a rage, seeing her offensive tone. "We told you he isn't in the city. Go back and come after a few weeks." "You can't claim I didn't warn you," Lyra sighed. She took off her gloves as well, revealing the mark of darkness. The guards' eyes widened as they saw the mark. "Shadow Knights," Lyra commanded. 2 Shadow Knights appeared behind the 2 guards, killing them instantly. After killing both the guards, Lyra sent the 2 Shadow Knights back before she walked back to Gabriel. She climbed on the horse. "The mansion in the center of the city is our destination." Gabriel entered the city with Lyra. The roads were filled with people. The city appeared to be very crowded. There was barely any space to walk, let alone ride on a horse, but Gabriel didn't need to worry about that since he had Lyra with him. Lyra didn't even try to hide her aura. That was one advantage of being a dark mage. Everyone was scared of you, so no one was going to dare to get close to you except the mages, and even if there were any mages here, Lyra didn't worry about them. People on the street kept moving aside on their own, clearing the path for Gabriel and his horse. "Are they selling the Staff of Dark Element? I thought those things were banned." Gabriel asked, noticing a staff with a black gem being sold in one of the shops along with other elemental staff. Only his element wasn't there. All these staffs were novice tier though, so their quality was questionable. "I told you, this is a city infested with crime. Rules are the last thing they follow," Lyra answered. "How come the Holy Church of Light doesn't shut this city down for ignoring rules made by them? You think they didn't try? They tried quite a lot of times, but they can't destroy this city." "Why?" "Because of Lambard. Because of him. Didn't you say he was a human? How can he stop the holy mages? There's a long story behind that. You'll know it when we meet him. He does love to talk after all," Lyra smiled. "You're about to explore a world that you didn't know existed. Let alone you, most people don't know about the things you're about to find out." Gabriel was really curious about what this girl talked about, but then again, he decided to keep his patience. Whatever Lyra spoke until now pointed toward a mystery that ordinary people like him were unaware of. There existed a human who could stop the Holy Church of Light from invading this city. He wondered just what kind of person that man was. He was soon going to get his answers. Without any mishaps, the 2 of them managed to reach the central mansion in the city. The entire city was in a really good condition. There were many luxurious houses and well-established markets. Even illegal work was done in the city with complete freedom, and no one cares about it. Still, the mansion which was established in the center of the city was the most luxurious mansion Gabriel had ever seen. The mansion covered 20 acres of land right in the middle of the city. Gabriel stopped the horse at the entrance, only to notice a woman standing there with a tray in her hand. The tray contained 2 glasses of water. There was no guard present here. "Welcome, guests. Master said you would be coming." The young lady welcomed Gabriel and Lyra. "Master is waiting for you." Gabriel gazed at Lyra in confusion. Lambard knew they would be coming. And he was waiting for them. Then why did his guards at the city's entrance not allow them in? Amidst thousands of questions, Gabriel got down the horse, followed by Lyra. Lyra picked up the glass of water from the tray. "It might be poisoned. You should be careful," Gabriel reminded Lyra. Lyra only smiled back in response. "This water isn't to drink. Pick the glass and follow the maid inside." Gabriel picked the other glass, still confused. The maid turned around with the empty tray and stepped inside the mansion. Gabriel also stepped inside the mansion with Lyra, holding a glass of water, not knowing why. 24 Chapter 24 You are listening at novelfull.audio. Holding the glass of water, the 2 youngsters entered the beautiful mansion, walking through the long hallway. Along the hallway, Gabriel noticed lots of portraits hanging on the wall. Unfortunately, the portraits were blank. There was nothing but a white blank in the portraits. Is there a reason behind having blank portraits? Gabriel asked. Any significance? They aren't blank, the maid responded without looking back. Gabriel once again observed the portrait, but he still couldn't find anything. There was nothing he could see in them. They were certainly blank. He got close to Lyra and asked, "Do you see anything in these portraits?" Lyra shook her head. "I can't see anything either. You need something special to see what's in the portraits and we don't have it. Only Lambard does." Along the hallway, there were many doors, each having a beautiful carving on them. Some had a floral design carved on them, while others had constellations carved on them. None of the doors were where the maid stopped. After walking non-stop for 10 minutes straight, the three stopped at the end of the hallway before the biggest door they had seen so far. The 20-foot-tall metallic door had two goblets floating on each side of the door, which surprised Gabriel. How were these two goblets floating in the air? Unlike the other doors, this door seemed pretty ordinary in itself since it had no carvings. It was plain, but the floating goblets made this place even more intriguing than the others. "This is why we were given the water," Lyra reminded Gabriel as she moved over to the left goblet. "You take the right one. Pour the water into the goblet at the same time as me." Gabriel was confused as to why they were doing it, but he did as she said. He took a few steps to the right to stand right before the other goblet. On the count of 3, pour all the water in. 1, 2, 3. On the count of 3, Lyra emptied her glass of water. Gabriel did the same. Both of them filled the goblets with the water they had been carrying along the way. Lyra placed the empty glass back on the tray of the maid. Gabriel did the same as he kept glancing back at the goblets. The goblets that were floating at their chest height started going down slowly after being filled as if they were getting heavier. With each passing second, the goblets sank a few inches before ultimately the floating goblets touched the ground. The metallic doors in front started opening as soon as goblets touched the ground. The phenomenon surprised Gabriel to some extent. He had seen doors that opened on their own in the mystical realm where he found the ancestral staff of necromancy. To see something similar here. This made him really curious as to what kind of place this was. "You two can go in," the maid instructed the young man and the lady. Gabriel and Lyra entered the place. The doors closed behind the two. At the same time, the water which was filling the gauntlet started disappearing slowly. Gabriel entered the hall, which was massive. The hall appeared to be over 100 meters wide and 100 meters long. Everything here was stark white, from the roof to the walls to the floor. Despite being such a massive hall, the place was completely void. There was nothing here except a throne which was placed at the exact center of the hall. 2 seats were placed before the throne. "Lambard, I know you want to show off with the newcomer, but it's not the time for a grand entry. Come out this instant," Lyra declared as she held Gabriel's hands and went ahead. "Oh, why spoil this old man's fun?" A man's voice fell in the ears of 2 youngsters as a hand landed on their shoulders. Gabriel turned around to see who it was, but no one was behind him. "You're looking in the wrong direction, young man." The voice, this time, came from a different direction. Gabriel turned once again, this time to the throne in the middle. He could see a young man sitting on the throne. It was unclear how he appeared inside the closed room without them noticing. The young man on the throne appeared to be slightly older than Gabriel, in his early 20s. He was dressed in a really majestic attire, wearing a gray robe on top of his blue attire. The man had long, deep blue hair with a few streaks of silver in them. His skin appeared to be so flawless that it was hard to know if he was a man or a woman just at first glance. The man had what appeared like a burnt mark on the left half of his face. His eyes also seemed so fascinating, with his right eye being red in color and his left being a lighter shade of blue. The man appeared to be an enthusiast of accessories. He had an earring in each of his ears. He wore a ring on each of his fingers, and all those rings had different designs, some looking very fascinating. The man also had a silver bracelet on both his hands and a silver pendant around his neck. Lambard, there you are. Lyra stepped closer to Lambard with Gabriel. It's good to see you as well, Lyra. It would have been even better if you hadn't killed my guards though. The young man lazily rolled his eyes. Not my fault. Those idiots tried to stop us, Lyra explained before taking a seat. Gabriel also did the same, sitting right beside Lyra while facing Lambard. Get to the point. What brought you here with a mage of light? Lambard inquired while observing the mark of light in the hands of Gabriel. I brought him here because I need something from you, Lyra chimed in since even Gabriel didn't know why he was here. Lambard sat more comfortably with his back resting against the cushion in the back of his throne. I never thought I would see the day when you will work with a light mage. Whatever, it's none of my concern. You know I don't deal with mages, but since it's you, I'll listen to your request. If I find it fair, I might lend you a hand. He glanced at Lyra with intrigue, wondering what she would ask for. I want something that you hold very dear to yourself, but only temporarily. It is an absolute necessity for what we have to do, Lyra stated. She knew she had to phrase everything just perfectly, or this stubborn guy wasn't going to listen. Don't circle around. Lambard chided Lyra lightly. Just tell me what you want. Old man, I need your 25 Chapter 25 You are listening at novelfull.audio. The old man heard the demand of Lyra. His eyes squinted as he was taken aback by this absurd demand. Impossible. Forget about it. Lambard stood up as he started leaving. Old man, wait. At least listen to why we need it. Gabriel was curious why Lyra was calling this person an old man. He looked to be in his early 20s. He didn't look old from any angle, but he was sure there was a reason behind it. If you give me what I asked for, I'm willing to give you something worth it in return, Lyra commented. There is nothing you can have which I need. Lambard rolled his eyes. Not even the eye of Osiris? Lyra asked, letting out a subtle smile. Lambard stopped in his tracks as he heard the words of Lyra. He turned around. You have the eye of Osiris. He walked back to his throne. Fine. If you give me the eye of Osiris, I will give you what you ask for, but only temporarily. Give me. He reached out his hand to Lyra. I don't have it with me right now, but we will get it for you if you give us what I ask. So you're trolling me. Lambard sighed in disappointment. That's not nice, you know. I'm not. The reason we need what I asked for is because I plan to rob the Royal Academy of Elements to get something I want. And I know the Eye of Osiris is there as well. If you can help, we can get the Eye of Osiris as well, Lyra told the young-looking man. We both win in this situation. So far, everything the two talked about went above Gabriel's head. He didn't understand a single thing about what all this meant. Most of these terms were something he was hearing for the first time. You think you can steal something from that place? I've tried before. That place is like a fortress. It's impossible to rob that place. Lambard refused to believe the young lady. Yeah, but just because you failed doesn't mean we will fail as well. You don't know that we will fail for sure. I can't afford to fail with this. Girl, I've seen more of the world than you can imagine. I know what's possible and what's not. Don't forget how old I am. Lambard spoke in arrogance and pride. There is nothing I haven't seen. There is nothing I don't know. It's impossible to steal from that place. What if I prove you wrong? What if I prove that you haven't seen everything and you don't know everything? Of course, I won't know minor things like the names of people you killed along the way and things like that, but I know all significant things, Lambard smirked. And what if I can prove you wrong with that too? There are many things that you probably haven't seen yet that can change the world. Lyra said in an amused tone. You're trying to get me to agree, which makes me a bit suspicious, but I'll take your bluff. Lambard smiled as he gazed into the eyes of Lyra. If you can show me something that I don't know which is significant enough that it can have world-changing effects, I'll accept that I don't know everything. I'll also give you the benefit of the doubt in your success at stealing. And you'll give me what I asked? Lyra asked. The man paused for a brief second before he agreed. Yes. But as I said, it must be a significant thing. If you can't, you'll leave your grimoire here instead. It would look nice in my collection. Lyra hadn't expected the man to ask for her grimoire in return, but if it was a bet, it was only fair for her to put something on the line as well. Moreover, she was sure of her victory. Deal, Lyra agreed. This was exactly the moment she wanted. Lambard had made a bet with her in his arrogance, and this was useful for her. This way, she could get him to fulfill her demand. So, what is it that I don't know? Lambard asked, seemingly amused. He wondered if the young lady could really come up with something. He believed it was impossible. Lyra gazed at Gabriel. Gabriel, show him your right hand. Let him know how ignorant the old man is about the recent changes of the world. Lambard tilted his head in confusion. Why was she asking the Mage of Light to show his right hand? What could there be? Gabriel did as he was asked and took off his right gloves, revealing the mark on his right hand as well. You didn't know about the appearance of a dual elemental mage, did you? Lyra observed the expressions of the old man, who appeared to be frozen in place, staring at the mark on Gabriel's right hand. Mark of Carrick. Lambard held Gabriel's hands, staring at the mark as if he was a child who was given his favorite gift. Mark of Carrick. Lyra muttered in confusion. The man knew this mark. Wasn't this a new element? How could he know what it was? Mark of Carrick. Gabriel also asked in confusion. This mark. I thought it would never appear. Why don't you? You are the first mage of necromancy. Lambard stood up. His eyes were filled with shock and excitement. You know this mark? Gabriel asked. How? I know everything about history since the history of this world is my first love. I've spent my life finding the truth about this world that is hidden in plain sight. The Mark of Carrick has made an appearance. The significance of this. I can't even imagine. Lambard turned to Lyra, grabbing her shoulders. Do you know the importance of this? Calm down, old man. Isn't it just a new element? Lyra shook her head. Why are you getting so excited? I might have gotten a bit overexcited, but it's wrong. It's not just a new element. It's the origin element, the man declared. Origin element. Gabriel frowned, not understanding the meaning. What did he mean by origin element? Instead, it was Lyra who seemed to have understood. It is. I thought the element of light was the origin element. You're wrong. Lambard sighed. Element of light isn't an origin element. It's just considered origin element because people don't know better. Will anyone tell me what origin element is? Gabriel felt like he was hearing two people talk in a foreign language since he couldn't decipher anything. They were using so many unknown terms. You don't know about origin element? Lambard asked incredulously. He couldn't believe there was a mage who didn't know about this. Wait. What's your age? When did you awaken your element? I'm 18. Gabriel glanced at his left hand's mark of light. I got my first element a few weeks ago. So young. Fascinating. You are probably the youngest mage with the element of light as well. The man also observed the element of light of Gabriel. Not only that, you have two elements, one being the origin element of necromancy. Man, even I'm jealous of your luck, and I'm never jealous of mages. The man rubbed his face to calm down his excitement. He was born in a small town, and he stayed there for all his life, so he doesn't know about the outside world other than the basic things. Lyra chimed in, explaining the reason behind Gabriel not knowing many things that were basics for people like them. It's not surprising he doesn't know about the origin element. Then he doesn't know about the history of the world either. I have so much to tell him, it seems. About the beginning. About the end, and about our world, which is also known as the Tomb of Gods. He will need this information to understand his element better. The man walked back to the throne. Lyra moved closer to Gabriel. She whispered in his ears, "I told you he loves to talk. There he starts. You know I can hear you, right?" Lambard squinted his eyes. 26 Chapter 26 You are listening at novelfull.audio. Lambard sat on his throne and closed his eyes. For a moment, there was only silence as no one spoke. Even the heartbeats of people could be heard in the silence. After a long time, the old man broke his silence as he opened his eyes, which looked really deep now. It was as if his eyes were filled with centuries of wisdom. This world of ours, it's something that no one truly understands. Not many people know the true history of this world or how it came to be. The people don't even know why we have the mages and where they get their powers from. Who made the grimoires? Who made the ancestral staffs? How did they achieve it? Where did the first mage get his powers from? What people don't understand, they start assuming. They start believing that it was the gods who gave these powers to the humans, selecting them as their warriors. They believe the first mage gained his abilities because he was selected by the gods. And that oldest element to be awakened is known as origin element. Most people think that the first element which was awakened by someone was the element of light. That's why they think light is the origin element, but most people are wrong. They are wrong about everything, not just the origin element. They are wrong about the origin of these abilities. They are wrong about how the first mages got their abilities. They are wrong about thousands of things. Even the most educated people are wrong about such things. As Lambard spoke, he kept turning his ring around his finger as if he was playing with it. What are they wrong about exactly? Gabriel asked. And how do you know all this if even the most knowledgeable don't know about this? I'll answer all your questions. But first, your tea is here, it seems. The young man gazed behind Gabriel. Gabriel looked back, only to be stunned. Another person had appeared behind him without making a noise. It was the same maid who had brought them to this place in the first place. The maid was carrying 2 cups filled with tea on her tray. Watching Lyra pick up a cup, Gabriel felt like he should pick the cup as well as courtesy, but he didn't. No matter who this person was, he couldn't believe this tea couldn't be poisoned. I'm sorry, but I'm full. You can give it to Master Lambard, Gabriel told the young maid in the back. You are really careful, it seems. Lambard smiled. Don't worry. There isn't poison in the tea. I'm sorry, but I've stopped trusting people with their words for now. Moreover, I don't think I want to drink anything at the moment, Gabriel answered calmly. Well, it's certainly a good trait to be suspicious of those around you. You never know who can betray you if you're not too careful. And by the time you realize, it's already too late. But still, don't go too far in your suspicions. Don't push your genuine supporters away because of suspicions, Lambard calmly stated before he picked the cup that wasn't taken by Gabriel. He took a sip right before the young man's eyes. The tea is delicious as always. Thanks, Maria. The woman smiled in response. I'm glad you liked it, Master. The maid waited for everyone to finish the tea before she left, taking the empty cups and giving everyone the privacy they wanted. Ah, so where was I? Ah, yeah. Don't push away people, you should keep some close. Because the element that you have. It's going to attract too much trouble for you. The ones who don't know what that symbol means will confuse it with the element of darkness. That is troublesome indeed, but not as troublesome as it's going to be when the ones who truly know about the truth of your element find out about your existence. You will need all the help you can get at that time, so yeah. Lambard didn't speak much about the actions of Gabriel and his lack of trust. In fact, he didn't mind it at all since it was a good trait when used in limitations. Still, he didn't forget to impart some knowledge to the young man, speaking from experience. Gabriel understood what the young man was trying to imply. He was trying to say that the path ahead was treacherous and that he couldn't walk alone in this path since there was a risk of losing himself in the process. This mark of Carrick, what is it? Can you answer me that first? Gabriel asked, getting back on track. You were talking about it. Right. The mark of Carrick. Lambard straightened his back. To know Carrick's mark, you need to know how the abilities that the mages use originated. How did they gain these abilities? Where did they come from? And no, as much as people like to claim it, these abilities didn't come from the gods. The man started explaining in a solemn tone. According to the last remaining scriptures that managed to survive the test of time, I have managed to gather quite a lot of information about these abilities that people call elemental magic. Gabriel listened carefully to the man's words. He wanted to ask many questions, but he didn't interfere and let the man continue at his own pace. Millions of years ago, there were no mages in this world. There were only humans who populated this world. There was no magic in this world. However, even though the people here didn't have magic, they had something else entirely. They had what they used to call science. Now, you may not understand what science means. Even I don't understand it entirely, but it was something really miraculous. The civilization of that time couldn't use magic, but they were still very advanced for their time. They managed to make tall buildings, things that could carry them from one place to another without them having to walk. They also made something that can fly in the air to take them to a faraway land, the man explained. Isn't that just magic? It's impossible to fly without magic. Could it be possible that those people used the word science for what we know as magic? I don't think there is any other way to fly, Gabriel asked. No. You're wrong. Initially, I also used to think what you think right now, but I soon found out that I was wrong. Science wasn't magic. It was something much more complex. Science could make many things possible that we can do with the help of magic. They made weapons that could destroy cities without using magic. They could fly and more. As I said before, that civilization was more advanced. If only I could go back in time to live in that timeline, would in a heartbeat. The man let out a deep sigh of disappointment. Unfortunately, I can never see that glorious civilization. Gabriel was amazed at the story he heard. Lyra seemed calmer as if she had listened to this story many times before. Why did science not exist anymore? How did people gain magic? How did that ancient civilization end? Greed and hate. These two things can destroy even the most prosperous of empires. It was no different for those people, the old man answered. 27 Chapter 27 You are listening at novelfull.audio. Those people were divided into multiple empires, and each empire competed for supremacy. The greed of getting ahead of the other empire and becoming stronger than the rest kept pushing the humans to make stronger weapons of mass destruction. A race had started in the field of those weapons. The greed for advancement and supremacy brought each of the empire to great heights, but then there was also the hate and conflicts between the empires. With so many weapons of mass destruction, all it needed was one spark, and the entire world was going to burn, Lambard grimly stated. Now you see why that civilization went extinct. A great war took place, and it was like nothing before. A mentality was spread between the empires that they were willing to have themselves be destroyed if it meant their enemy was going to be destroyed as well to teach them a lesson. And thus, there was that war. The war which destroyed most of the life forms in the world. Almost all the humans had died, leaving only a few in existence. Most of the animals that used to exist during that time went extinct. Only the ones we see today managed to survive. The war changed the entire landscape and ecosystem of the world, destroying most of the natural resources of this world. Ultimately, the humans that managed to survive learned a lesson after all this. They didn't want to repeat the same mistake again, so they just gave up science altogether. They started living the basic life. Throughout the millions of years, slowly our world managed to recover and become more habitable. All the remnants of the past were wiped out. The people who were alive during the time of the ancient civilization destroyed all documents and evidence of that ever existing. Those people had seen what hell looked like from up close, and they didn't want their children and their future generations to see something similar. Even though humans kept increasing in number with coming generations, the ones who knew about science died of old age, leaving no knowledge behind. The old man finished the story that seemed to cover a long-forgotten history of this world. That would explain why that ancient civilization was wiped, but I still don't get it. How does that relate to the mages? How does that relate to our ability and the mark of Carrick? The incident which I talked about has everything to do with the elements of yours because it's what gave birth to Carrick. The first human god that we know of. So when people say that humans received powers from gods, they are wrong. It's not humans who received the powers from gods. Instead, it's the humans who became gods themselves. First human god. Gabriel frowned. According to the stories that I've had access to, that's right. Carrick was the first human god, and his element of death and necromancy was the origin element that gave birth to a new era after destruction. The era of gods. This world that you know of. This isn't just any ordinary world. It's the world where gods were born. A world where gods walked amongst men. The world where many gods died as well. That's the reason this world is called the Tomb of Gods. You don't understand how, right? The old man smiled. He could see the confusion on young Gabriel's face. As I stated before, it all started with the great war of ancient civilization and a young man who was right in the middle of all this chaos. Or should I say it started with the end of that war? Millions of years ago, there was a fire in the entire city. Screams and agonizing cries were everywhere, enough to torment the consciousness of everyone that heard them. Unfortunately, those screams were often buried in the explosion that took place at regular intervals. Before long, all the screams and cries for help went silent. The explosions stopped as well, only when the entire city was destroyed. No single structure was left standing in the city. The streets of the royal capital of the Zeiss Empire were painted red in blood. Bodies could be seen littered all around, some missing their limbs. The entire sight was so gruesome that it would have made any sane person close their eyes in disgust. Amidst all the unmoving bodies, there laid the body of a young man who seemed to be in his early 20s. His body was covered with blood. The young man was covered in blood from top to bottom. Most of his face was burned, and so did his skin for the most part. It was impossible to even recognize him for the most part. The previously handsome face of the young prince of Zeiss Empire was something that was disgusting. Unfortunately, no one was there to see his face since everyone was already dead. The young man also had his entire left arm missing, which was obliterated in the explosion. He barely survived. Whatever was left of his previously royal attire was now covered in blood. In the entry city, only one person was breathing, and it was this unmoving young man. After an hour, the young man finally made some movements as if he was regaining consciousness. The man had lost most of his blood, yet he survived, which was no less than a miracle in itself. He opened his eyes to complete silence. There were no cries for help. There were no explosions. The entire city was silent. Deadly silent. The young man opened his eyes, which were bleeding as well. He rubbed them to regain some clarity, only to notice the massive amount of rubble ahead which belonged to the royal castle. The place which was his home. The place where he grew up. Watching that place like this, the young man roared in agony as he forced his body up. It didn't matter how much pain he was in, he didn't care at the moment as he forgot everything while running to the remains of the castle. Mother! Father! Rhea! The man roared. His voice was hoarse and filled with pain. The man tried to remove the rubble to find his family, but he couldn't. With just one hand, it was impossible. And even if he had two hands, he couldn't do it since he was so weak. He didn't stop. He kept trying as if he had gone crazy, but he didn't succeed. His entire family was buried in the rubble, and the entire city was destroyed. There was nothing left. Everything was gone because of this war that his father started. Only he had survived in this entire city. He stared at the rubble blankly as tears of blood dripped down his eyes as he realized that he had lost his entire family to this war. He was all alone. 28 Chapter 28 You are listening at novelfull.audio. He also dropped on top of the rubble in weakness. He didn't believe he was going to survive for long. He was probably going to die soon as well, but he wasn't sad. He was happy that he was also standing at the death's door. At this point, death was like mercy to him. It could free him from all this pain and agony. He closed his eyes as he waited for the sweet death to take him in his embrace so he could meet his family again. As he had his eyes closed, many scenes flashed before his eyes. His mother singing songs for him. Teaching him about various things about the world, caring for him. He also saw how he used to tease his sister often. All those happy memories were with him in his last moments. There were also some bittersweet memories of him trying to convince his father not to wage war, only to fail. Tears kept trickling down his eyes while his body bled. You did this. Yes, it's him. He's the sin of that demon who pushed us into this war. That bastard. Everyone died because of him, yet his own son survived. Unfair. It's unfair, unfair. The young man was prepared to embrace his death when he heard some screeching sounds around him. It was as if thousands of people were chanting in his ears how it was unfair that he survived. Instead of being angry that these people wished for his death, the young man was happy. He was happy that some of his citizens had survived this tragedy. He didn't care if they wanted his death. He only cared about the fact that not everyone was dead. The young man slowly opened his eyes and gazed at his surroundings to see his citizens who had survived but probably hated him. Unfortunately, even as he opened his eyes, he couldn't see anything. There was no one there. There was not a single person there, yet the young man continued hearing the voices. For a moment, he even wondered if he had gone crazy. He should have died, not us. He should have died. The spawn of that devil survived while we died. This is injustice. He should have died. The screeching continued and only intensified as more and more time passed. Previously, the young man felt as if hundreds of people were speaking, but now it appeared that the number was in the millions. The young man didn't know that what he was hearing was the voice of the spirits of people who had died here. For some reason, he was able to listen to them. With time, more and more spirits gathered around the young man, each cursing him and wishing for his death since their entire families were wiped out because of the war that the royal family started. With so many spirits around, something strange was also happening. Each of these spirits was cursing the young man who was already at death's door, unaware that all their curses were doing something else entirely. All the negative energy that was coming from the spirits toward the young man was being absorbed in his body somehow. Millions of spirits hated the young man, but that hate was becoming the thing man's strength even without his knowledge. The gathering of all this negative energy from the dead was having a miraculous effect. The young man didn't know why, but he felt something strange. It was as if something was happening to his body. The pain. It was decreasing. His skin was also slowly healing. He hadn't realized it, but a black mark had appeared around his right hand since his left hand didn't exist, culminating all the negativity of the dead at its core. The mark was something that never existed before, but it had come into existence due to all this energy of the dead. The mark on the right hand of the man provided a conduit for his body to better absorb all the energy of the dead. The more these spirits cursed the young man, the stronger he became before the mark was strong enough to absorb more than just the energy of the dead. The mark started pulling all the spirits toward itself. The spirits screeched in pain, feeling the strange pull. They tried to resist, but it was impossible. The spirits kept being absorbed by the mark of the dead. One after another, the spirits kept being absorbed, and no one could run or escape. On the other hand, the wounds of the young man started healing even faster. All his burn marks were gone as his skin became even better than it was before the war. His left hand also returned. Even the young man didn't understand how this was possible. The strange mark also gave the young man another ability. He was able to see all the spirits who were cursing him. I can see the dead. My wounds. The young man was in disbelief at what had happened. All his pain was gone, and he was as good as new. Unfortunately, he wasn't happy at all this. He recognized the spirits that were around him. Some belonged to the maids he has grown up with, while others belonged to the servants and the guards. Even his own people were cursing him for the outcome. As for the other spirits, they were also his own citizens. They had died, and only their spirits were left. He understood their hate, and he believed it was justified, but what he was seeing now wasn't right. He saw the spirits groaning in pain and trying to run away, only to be absorbed in his mark. Stop it. Let them go. The young prince roared, but it didn't happen. The mark didn't seem to listen to him, as if it was a process that couldn't be stopped. The man tried everything to stop this. He had already made these people suffer so much when they were alive. He didn't want them to suffer even in death. The young man covered his mark with his other hand, but the absorption didn't stop. You demon child, even in death, you want to hurt us. You should have died. You should have died, not us. The spirits became even angrier, but they could do nothing but empty curses, which made the young man even stronger against his wishes. 29 Chapter 29 You are listening at novelfull.audio. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it. Let them go. Stop it. The man didn't want to hurt the spirits. Hurting them was like hurting himself. He wanted them to be at peace, but the mark wasn't listening to him. The young man clenched his fist as he made a terrifying decision to stop all this. He ran to a sword that was lying in the distance and picked that sword in his left hand before chopping his hand from the wrist along with that mark to stop. Arg! He roared in pain. His actions were really painful, but he hoped he could stop the torment on these innocent souls just by sacrificing one hand, but it didn't work. His hand healed on its own, and the mark was back where it was previously. The process didn't stop for even a second. He was absorbing the souls of men, elders, ladies, and even kids. The young man felt so hurt that he couldn't stop it. With each soul absorbed, the man hated this mark even more. It was as if a part of his soul was breaking with each passing second. The cries of the spirits, it was too much, but the man couldn't do anything. He was going crazy. He even closed his eyes and his ears so he wouldn't have to hear the cries, but nothing worked. The cries continued for hours as millions of souls were absorbed in the young man's body. Unfortunately, this didn't seem to be the worst part of it, as he heard a voice he could never forget. Brother. The voice made him open his eyes abruptly, only to see the soul of his little sister being pulled by the mark. No! The young man roared in disbelief. He was about to devour the soul of his own sister. I'm begging you, please don't. Please don't devour her. He dropped to his knees, but it didn't stop. He heard the cries of his sister as her soul was absorbed in the mark as well. The young man's entire face was covered in tears. Not only could he not save his family, but he instead devoured them. He was broken. His eyes lost their focus as he sat with his back resting against the wall, seemingly defeated. It is said that Carrick absorbed the souls of his entire family against his wishes, and he couldn't do anything. He was born a human, but the strange phenomenon had given him some form of divinity. He has become a conduit of death and the undead, Lambard explained. He gazed at the right hand of Gabriel. And that is the origin of the mark of Carrick, which is also known as the cursed mark of death and necromancy. It's the mark of the first god ever to exist that we know of. Also, that moment was what started the era of gods. So the element of light. There was a human who gained the strength of light just like Carrick. That's right. However, it's not clear how the woman gained the holy energy. As I told you before, most of the literature is lost in time. Only some related to Carrick's history managed to survive. We don't know how other gods originated, but we do know some things. For example, all the gods that came later, they all came because of Carrick. Lambard continued, revealing even more surprising information. Because of Carrick absorbing so many souls, the balance of life and death was broken. The barrier between humans and something much more divine became much more blurry. The natural energies of this world became much more chaotic because of the lack of balance, and that chaos is what gave birth to the other gods. How do you know it's the truth and not just someone's fragment of imagination? Gabriel inquired, finding it hard to believe that this world belonged to gods. You don't believe it? Lambard moved a few inches ahead and looked straight into the eyes of Gabriel. What you said doesn't make sense logically, Gabriel answered. You said everyone in that city was dead, that meant no one was there to see what happened to the souls. If no one was there, how could there be literature about that incident? I don't believe Carrick would have written it on his own. Lambard blankly stared at Gabriel before he tossed his head back, laughing. So that's what makes you doubt this story. No one had to be there to know what happened there. Someone peeked in the past of Carrick without his permission to see what he went through. And that person is the one who wrote about it in their personal entry. A few pages of that journal managed to survive. I paid a fortune to buy those pages a couple of decades ago. As I told you before, your knowledge about this world is really lacking, boy. You have 6 elements in this world. Counting the element of death and necromancy, there are a total of 7 elemental mages that come from generation to generation, but that doesn't mean there weren't more gods in the past. The imbalance that created the 7 gods also created the hundreds of demi-gods that only a few people know about. Unlike the gods, the demi-gods didn't leave anything behind. The ring of Apophis that Lyra came here to ask me. What do you think that ring is? Why do you think she needs it? Why do you think even the Church of Light doesn't destroy this place despite what I do? He asked Gabriel. It's all because of the Newman artifacts that I gathered. The artifacts that absorbed the divine aura of the demi-gods when they were alive, gaining a divine spirit of their own. One of those demi-gods was Apophis. The demigod was known for many things, but mostly his tricks on commoners and unaware people. He was a trickster who could disguise as anyone he wished to fool people. I hope you aren't going to tell that disturbing story about him again. I don't care what he did in the past. He is dead now. All I need is his ring. Lyra, who had been sitting silently until all this while, finally spoke up. What disturbing story? Gabriel asked, curious. The thing about Newman artifacts had undoubtedly caught his interest. Mythical artifacts that were used by the demi-gods that can even force the Holy Church of Light to reconsider attacking this place. No matter how disturbing the story may be, it's all in the past, Lambard answered Lyra. We can't do anything about the past. We can only learn from history, but we can only do that if we know the history. Now don't be a spoilsport and let me tell the story. I don't want Gabriel to walk down the same wrong path. Maybe he will learn something from the tragic story of Apophis. 30 Chapter 30 You are listening at novelfull.audio. Gabriel waited to hear the story, having no idea what it could be about, but seeing Lyra's disgusting expressions, he felt that it must be something terrible. Not making him wait for long, Lambert started the story. Apophis was a demigod that lived in the era when demigods were more often seen than not. He was known as someone who couldn't care less about the moral rules that this world had established. He did whatever he pleased, as long as he desired. He even robbed mortals at times just to see their expression. That's why he is also called the most annoying demigod amongst the ranks of demigods. Still, despite all his tactics, the other demigods didn't stop him. They let him do as he pleased since his small tricks weren't causing any serious harm and deaths. With time, the boldness of Apophis only increased as he moved from city to city to get rid of boredom. One such city was the city of Aloran. It was a city he had never visited before, but as soon as he entered the city, he decided to settle there. You know why? He liked the city. Gabriel took a guess. Nope. Lambert shook his head. It's because he fell in love with a woman who lived in the city. A married woman. He tried to pursue the woman, but she avoided his advances at every instance and refused him many times. It was only after he finished that he stopped his disguise and told the woman the truth. He told her that he already had her body and now she was impure for her husband. He asked her to come with him and leave this town. Gabriel didn't know how to respond. Apophis sounded like a really messed up guy. What he didn't wasn't just a trick, it was evil. Apophis told the woman to come to the city's entrance by the evening to leave with him, or he was going to tell the entire city that the woman slept with him to sully her reputation. Not only did he do something vile, but he also blackmailed her using that information. He waited at the city entrance for the woman's arrival, but she didn't come. After getting tired, he went back to her house to force her to come with him, but as soon as he got to her house, he saw her hanging by a rope. The woman had killed herself. Shocked, Apophis ran from the city, not realizing that the woman had left a letter on the table before dying in which she wrote everything that had happened. When the woman's husband returned home, he saw the wife he loved more than his life dead. For a long time, he was in disbelief before he started crying while bringing her down. He placed her dead body on the bed and asked her why she would do this, but the dead couldn't answer. It said that the husband discovered the letter and found out the truth. He wanted revenge on the man who did it, but he didn't have the strength, but he knew someone who did. After giving his wife a proper burial, the man left the city and went to the city of divinity. A city where most of the demigods lived at that time. And one of those demigods was the brother of his dead wife. Apophis didn't know that the woman he was after was the sister of demigod Raini, one of the more powerful demigods. Apophis was allowed to do as he pleased because he was careful not to annoy the powerful demigods. As for the 7 gods, he didn't even dare to be in the same city as them. Unfortunately, this time his luck had run out since he didn't know who was the brother of the lady he was harassing. This one mistake finally brought him to his death's door. The demigods who refused to stop him throughout the years finally took action as his acts had crossed the limits and had tainted the reputation of the demigods. Apophis tried to run, he tried to hide, he used all the tricks he could to survive as long as he found, but ultimately he was caught and killed. All that was left of Apophis was his Newman artifact. The ring that was given to him by his mother when he was a kid. The time he never took off. The ring of Apophis, Lambert explained. This ring is an amazing artifact that can help you disguise and change your looks to anyone you want. Unfortunately, this ring isn't without flaws either. You can disguise yourself as someone else with this ring, but your disguise stops working whenever the person you're disguising as gets within 100 meters of you. So one must be careful before selecting who he wants to disguise as. There is one more flaw to it. Since you're only using the divine energy of Apophis through the ring, you can only draw out a weak transformation, unlike the real Apophis. There are people in the world who can see through your disguise, for example, the heads of the 5 churches of elements that still stand. The Dean of the Academy of Element might also be able to see through your disguise, so when you use the ring, you should do everything you can to avoid them when you're in disguise, alright. Lambard had already promised to give the ring of Apophis previously, and he decided to keep his promise. He took off the beautiful golden ring from his left ring finger and placed it in the hands of Gabriel. I'm only giving this to you temporarily. And it's only for 7 days from the moment you enter the royal capital. After 7 days, the ring will return to me on its own. Think of it as a safety mechanism in case you fail. I don't want to lose this precious piece of history. Only 7 days. Lyra exclaimed. That's not enough time. We might need longer. I'm sorry, I can't do more. You'll only have 7 days after you enter the holy city. You can either take my offer or leave it. I'm not forcing you. Moreover, if you can really succeed, 7 days are more than enough to do it. If you can't do it in 7 days, then chances of your success were probably never there in the first place. Lambard wasn't fazed by the questioning of Lyra. He didn't back off. Once he had made up his mind, it was done. 7 days should be enough. Gabriel took the offer. He wore the ring on the middle finger of his right hand, right beside the black ring on his ring finger. The golden and the black ring on his fingers created a nice contrast. Even if he had received only 5 days, he would have taken the offer even then, since he wasn't going to the academy to study. He was going there to steal, and one attempt was all he was going to have.